Welcome to B-Sides Orlando 2018. We have a treat for you today. We have Joe Gray, who is a social engineer extraordinaire and forensics enthusiast, and currently the only winner of the DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag. Joe?
Thanks. How's it going? Can everyone hear me all right? No? Okay. Just come a little closer to be all good. I joke. And apparently my computer went to sleep. I apologize. It happens. Everybody needs a nap from time to time, right? I can use a nap. So the reason it's actually doing this is because I configured it to hibernate so that I could actually get forensic images off of it using the hibernation file, which is something I'll talk about a little bit later, but it is annoying, I will say that. And here we go. So everyone enjoying B-Sides Orlando thus far? As soon as I find my cursor, we're going to be good. Here we go. All right, so welcome to Dear Blue Team. This is basically advice from the forensics teams with regards to advice to expedite your capabilities. Before we get started, apparently the clicker's not working. Before we get started, the thoughts and opinions I express here are mine and mine alone, and they do not reflect those of IBM. So about me, I'm a senior security architect at IBM. I used to be a system administrator. I used to be a security engineer. I do some forensic stuff as a hobby. As stated, I am the winner of the 2017 DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag. I did used to navigate submarines in the Navy. That's not a joke in the least. I write blogs. I have my podcast, Advanced Persistent Security. It just came back after a year-long hiatus. Check it out. I've got 2 new episodes out there right now, and I tap out a lot in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So Helio Gracie said, you either win or you learn. I learn a lot. So why this topic and this talk? So recently I took SANS Forensics 508, which is Advanced Incident Response, Digital Forensics, and Threat Hunting. And in the reflective stage prior to finishing it up and doing its Capture the Flag portion, I was mulling over some of this stuff, especially dealing with memory forensics. And as I was applying it, I thought, this would have done wonders back in Job X in the past when we had that incident. If we had this baseline and had this information, it would have been so much easier to respond to this. So basically, why are we not doing this proactively? And when I say proactively, I'm not specifically referring to threat hunting, which when we typically think of proactive incident response, that's what we think of. So basically, this talk is the outcome of those thoughts. Just plug in the clicker in again to see if it'll load so I can get mobile. Oh no. My system just crashed. It seriously just crashed. So anyway, I'll wing it until this restarts because it's at 15%. So basically, what we're looking at, I'll go ahead and give you the traditional incident response style talk that takes up an entire slide in this presentation. So we always hear, you have to have your asset inventory, you have to have your baseline, you need to know what's there, your network inventory, you have to have your access controls, your configuration management database. And that is all true. And you need to have your incident response plan in advance. That's also true. But I'm talking about this from the perspective of we need to look at this and have a more verbose baseline. We need to have things like repositories of the hashes of our files. For the pen testers in here, how many times do you try to Trojan something like SVC host or even for the other incident responders in here, how often do you see SVC host used to perform malicious functions? Exactly. So if you have a hash of that, both as an MD5 using MD5 deep and SS deep as a fuzzy hash, that actually allows you a benchmark to be able to compare this from. So you very easily could have, two repositories. You can compare and say, yep, these hashes check, it's a safe file, or no, these hashes don't match. Let's take a look at the SS deep, which is a byte by byte hash, and see what's actually changed. That's one proactive step. Another one would be forensic imaging. When you have a standard baseline image, your golden image, if you will, you take an image of it, a forensic memory image. So you use something like FTK Imager to take the image. You have the file. You now have a baseline. And it's a baseline far more verbose and better than a baseline that's like, okay, we have Adobe Reader installed, we have Google Chrome, we have Microsoft Office, we have iTunes and Napster. It's cool to know what software is installed, but it's more important to know how it's executing when it's running. How is this behaving with memory? So in doing so, that makes life a lot more simple. Volatility is one of the key tools used in memory forensics. Your alternatives, for the most part, would be recall, which is actually a fork of the original volatility. It's now maintained by the Google team and integrated with Google Rapid Response, which is an agent-based live memory capture and incident response tool to deploy to systems. In that sense, with both of those tools, you can actually see what's going on in memory. With volatility specifically, they have functions for baselines, dealing with drivers, processes, and services. So if you have a golden image and you have the memory image of this, you can actually compare it against something that is known good. You're not scrambling at the last second whenever an incident has occurred to find a clean system that may or may not be clean to compare this with. You know from the get-go, this is based on my golden image, I know it's clean. So the comparison should be fairly simple. Just seeing if it had finished the restart yet. It says it's 100%, but it hasn't. But that's certainly something to take a look at. Furthermore, there are files within the Windows architecture that would enable you to take a look and see what's really going on. Examples would be prefetch, which is going to check compatibility with other applications. Another one that's very similar is referred to as the shim cache, which is the application compatibility cache. And these are files that are written anytime something is executed. You can also look at things like the alternate data streams, the ADS. When you download a file, it initially creates an ADS. So whenever you dump that into a timeline, you're able to assess this and look at it and determine, okay, this file was downloaded at this time, even if the browser history was completely wiped out. As an incident responder, if I go and I see that the prefetch file is completely gone, I'm going to look at the time, because if I recall correctly, that file is overwritten at 12:30 every day. I could be confusing that with the shim cache. But if it's empty, that's going to be indicative of someone, an advanced actor, or just overriding, depending on the time, doing something that they probably shouldn't have. So when we think to transition until this gets back up and we can resume the normal scheduled program, when we talk about memory forensics, this talk focuses on two tools, Redline and volatility. Redline is a GUI tool created by Mandiant. I will tell you that anything after version 1.20 you don't want to use. You want to use, the version I use is 1.14. And the reason I say to use that is because version 1.20 did away with a thing called the MRI, the Malware Rating Index. And that's going to take a heuristic look at the file or the process or whatever and ascertain abnormalities and significant deviations, and it's going to assign a risk score. So in my demo, if the system ever comes back up, it actually shows a file with an MRI of 97. And it shouldn't come as much of a surprise, but it's SVC host. So again, that's pretty commensurate with any sort of attack. You can also look at processes, drivers, and the hierarchy tree. So you can see which processes are spawning other processes so that you can kind of see where things are derived from. So with psexec, for example, it actually shows as an install whenever you use it, both on the source host and the destination host. The file name is slightly different. So whenever you see that in the memory image, you can say, okay, was this a system administrator or a help desk person using the system? This is an HR system. Why should HR be using psexec? And the answer is they probably shouldn't. But it's something to look at. Then you can turn around, open that same memory image from the command line in volatility. And from that point, you can even go as far as to say, okay, what network connections were there? You can look at things like the sockets and the connections. They have two plugins specifically associated with determining if something is malicious in terms of malware, and that is malsysproc and malscan. You can look at the handles, which deals some with the drivers. You can even run Mimikatz out of it for all you red teamers out there who like running Mimikatz. If you can get a memory image, say, of a virtual machine and you're trying to crack a password of a system that's on it, get the vmem file, convert it over, open it in volatility, point to it, Mimikatz, you got passwords. Who said that a blue team talk couldn't benefit the red team, right? Man, NSA spyware sure is slowing that thing down. But memory forensics, it's something that we often see bypassed. It seems so much of witchcraft or smoke and mirrors, and it's one of those things that we just consider it to be voodoo. So why are we doing it? Why are we taking the time to capture the memory image? We can just plug FTK up to it and take an image of the file system. Isn't that enough? We might have a couple of PCAPs from the SIM from some malicious traffic. Isn't that enough? No, it's not. Because with the file system, there's certain things that you can do with the file system, but it's a lot easier to overwrite the file system. The memory typically shows a lot more truth. And in that sense, there are actors out there that can modify things that you would see in memory, but in the words of Rob Lee, the author of Forensics 508, if there's an attacker that's capable of overriding that, you're probably not going to know they're in your network anyway. So for example, if you know a specific registry key, in volatility, you can actually access that registry key and get the registry key creation date. For a standard attacker, they're not going to be able to overwrite that. That is truth. When you write a file and it creates a registry key, it is truth. It's assumed that some actors can change that, but again, you're not going to find them for the most part. They're the ones that everyone says is attacking them. Don't worry about the publicly accessible RDP and SAMSAM coming through and ransomwares across, maybe the 7th largest city in the United States, maybe Silicon Valley of the South. Ludacris and Outkast may have written some songs about the city. Not saying any names. But could we get anything from that? Of course we could. In a previous life as a consultant, I did incident response on a client. It had been SAMSAM. And basically, the forensics team they had evaluating it said no. The reality was yes. They had a publicly accessible RDP connection that logged in as administrator with a 4-character password, no multi-factor authentication. That system administrator's response was, we need to disable WMI and PowerShell. Because after the attacker compromised this via RDP, they used PowerShell, WMI, and psexec to pivot. And they ransomed 160 servers. It cost them $32,000. And the reason they chose the forensics firm that they did is because that firm happened to have Bitcoin to use. So they were able to quickly pay. But the problem with that organization is they were tied to other much larger organizations, and it is mere luck that the attacker did not pivot to those organizations. Their response, prior to even calling the forensic team, was disable the RDP and delete the VM that it was running on. Does anyone see a problem in that from the forensics and incident response perspective? No evidence, exactly. Well, what about the network logs, right? You want to guess what was disabled? Logging. Guess which SIM they used? I don't know because they didn't have one. And I'm not up here to shame a client. In fact, this is purely improv since I can't see my slides and go through that. So bear with me while my NSA monitored device comes back up and running. If a hard reboot would work, I might even try that. Why not? What's the worst that could happen? Don't answer that. I just hope I don't have to follow through with the IT crowd having to reboot 3 or 4 times. All right, it's coming up. Sure. Come on up, Eric. No. This is the second time of a presentation. The other was, seeing as you're a former DC865 organizer as well, this was actually presented to the Knoxville LOPSA chapter. Give it up for Eric Gershman. Absolutely. A pen tester turned tech support. Beautiful, right? I missed it. Of course. So with regards to the logging, right? Can we get anything from the logs? Of course we can. But can the logs be overwritten? Can anti-forensic techniques be employed to make the logs non-discernible? Of course. There are tools out there now that you can get and execute that would actually allow you to create a bunch of worthless logs to fill up the file. How can you mitigate this, though? Any ideas? Exactly, move them to a log server. Should that log server be internal or should it be in the cloud? The answer is yes, whichever is better for you. If you're in a regulated environment or a classified environment, the cloud is probably not an option. If you have the network topology to support securing that log server, internal is not a bad idea. If you've got the budget, do both. Because what happens when the attacker finds the log server? Because if you've got a persistent attacker weaseling their way around your organization, there's a good chance they might find your log server. A simple net discover or ARP scan could possibly find it quite easily. So what should we be thinking about with this from the anti-forensics perspective? What about the tool SRM? Anyone in here ever heard of SRM? Okay, it's an anti-forensics tool, which basically, before it starts deleting files, it overwrites them. So even if you use something like SleuthKit, Scalpel, or Foremost to carve the file out, it's been overwritten. So what can you do with it? Man, it's thinking. That computer must be smart because it's thinking really hard. So unfortunately, I'll probably cut the demo piece out just for the sake of time. But in that same sense, what are we doing to protect this? Application whitelisting might be able to do some of that, right? So in that sense, okay, it's coming. Here we go. Thanks, Eric. Give it up for Eric for helping out. Yeah, thank you. He needs a speaker badge. I don't trust it either, especially with this NSA monitor device sticker on it. It's got all their, like that sticker comes automatic, like it installs like 19 pieces of spyware. And if you install it on a Tuesday, for whatever reason, it actually implants 24 pieces. I think it's like a 2-for-1 Tuesday or something. I don't know. But application whitelisting or even blacklisting could stop, to a degree, SRM. But then you have to think of the perspective of what happens when the hash of this file changes. What happens when they change enough in the file header so that the detection mechanism doesn't work. So whitelisting would be a solution for this unless you can Trojan something else. And even then, depending on how that is implemented, it may work, it may not. I've got a background. We're looking good here. But what can we do to prevent this? Training, awareness, good network principles, right? So training our users, and this is a soapbox I get on whether I'm talking incident response, forensics, social engineering, OSINT, any of the above. Basically, in that sense, as an industry, especially in the Twitterverse, too often we expect users to be security professionals. HR should not be trying to determine, is this file malicious? Is this email legitimate? As security professionals, we should be enabling them to do their jobs more efficiently. When we think about HR, accounting, sales, these are all roles within an organization that are expected to open every email, and most of them have attachments, and they're expected to open these attachments. How else would HR be able to open up your I-9 form when you're trying to get employed? How would this company you're trying to purchase a firewall from be able to open up your purchase order if they didn't do it, right? So we need to build those defenses, and we need to integrate this with our incident response. So in the awareness program, we need to explicitly define the precise actions to take, by whom, and who to contact. For example, in your organization, if everyone is plugged in, try to use the same color Ethernet cable so that you can put a little note beside the computer. If something funky's happened with your computer, you think you've clicked a fish, you think it's infected with malware, your fan just kicks on and won't stop, you know, all the cool things that happen these days. This happens, here's what you're supposed to do. Unplug the purple cable, call this phone number, don't send an email. You could also send a text, put it in Slack, smoke signals, carrier pigeons, Morse code, or even 2 Campbell soup cans tied together with a rope to talk through it. Something to that effect. People need to know who to report to and how to report. And the social engineer in me says, even when they click a fish, you don't want to punish them for it because you want people to report things. When they're getting this weird pop-up asking for credentials, and they're in Google Chrome, but it says it's for Outlook, and they use Google Apps, that's problematic. Outlook shouldn't be asking for your credentials if you don't even have it open and your email is brokered through Google Apps, right? So in that sense, that's something that's definitely reportable. And why it's not reported is typically from the fact that people don't want to feel dumb. They don't want to be ridiculed. They're afraid they're going to get in trouble because the company might bring the hammer down on them and throw the book at them and say, you did something wrong, so we're going to punish you. You're going to get fired. Even as someone who creates phishing emails or created phishing emails for a living for a while, there's a few fish I've got that I've almost clicked. I got one from Amazon that said that my iPhone 7 was on its way, and that my credit card, the billing had been wrong. I had an iPhone 7 on the way. I didn't get it from Amazon, but that didn't click initially. So my thumb was right there about to push the button, and then I realized my Amazon account is not it doesn't tie to this email address. It ties to a different one. And then I got another one. It was about April of last year. I was using Delta Airlines to fly to B-Sides Charm in Baltimore. I was flying into BWI, and it said that my flight from Atlanta to Dulles had been rerouted, and I needed to pay the difference. It was from a domain delta with 2 A's at the end, .com. And as a byproduct, I almost fell for it because it was timely. And the problem with that is when things are timely, there's the shock value. And we are almost off to the races. I apologize for this. I'm going to give this computer a very stern talking to at the end of this presentation in the speaker green room. Let this be a lesson learned in disaster recovery, which is another corresponding discipline that we should certainly try to integrate more with incident response. As soon as the file opens, we will be good. All right. And here it is. The suspense is killing me here. Okay, while this is loading, we should always think of things in the incident response perspective of how do we make things better, right? So we're quick to jump into the identification phase, which we'll go over the phases. That's actually one of the first slides you'll see once we get past the About Me slide, assuming it doesn't crash. And if it does, the computer may take a swim in Lake Buena Vista or the pool at the hotel I'm staying at. I don't know. It didn't bring its floaties. But we're quick to jump into the identification phase and say, yep, we've identified something. Okay, let's contain it. And then we rush through containment and immediately jump into eradication, which to a degree is the right answer. But we don't spend enough time verifying the containment. Okay, we've contained what we think. Let's do a few verification checks. Anyone in here ever heard of Yara, Stix, or Taxi? Or even OpenIOC? What if I told you those formats, most of them will actually interact perfectly with your SIM or your vulnerability scanner? I know for a fact you can dump Yara rules into Nessus and scan your organization with Nessus, as long as you have some indicators of compromise to look for. But where do you get those indicators of compromise to put into that? Well, the answer is simple. Everywhere. When we're looking at indicators of compromise, Rob Lee in the course likes to break it out into 3 types of IOCs, indicators of compromise. And he calls it the ABCs. The atomic, the behavioral, and the computed. Things like a hash, that's computed. Atomic, that's going to be, okay, it's going for this vertical. Another computed one might be the URI or the IP address. Those are useful, but they're not all inclusive. Just because a system on your network is communicating with a system that has been known at one point in time, based on someone's analysis, whether it be legit or not, to be malicious, does that mean that that system is infected? It certainly warrants a second look, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything in particular. I mean, if someone really wanted to be malicious, they could go and put all of Google's IP addresses in a bunch of indicators of compromise, and your IR team's going to be bouncing off the walls, taking a look and identifying these incidents to call them false positives, because your SIM that had a threat intelligence policy ingesting a feed from somewhere is saying anyone doing a Google search is contacting an infected machine. That's enough of a decoy that they could easily go through and do a different attack. I would hope that it would be vetted, and I know some of them are vetted more than others. And I have good news. The good news is that the presentation is back up. Can everyone see the slides? Yes, no? No. Okay. There we go. All right, so back to our scheduled program. So shifting into the slides itself. So we've talked about incident response, we've talked about digital forensics, but really, what are they? Now that I'm done improvising, what are they? So basically, digital forensics is basically the science of piecing together what happened, what steps occurred, and it's dissecting using the lay of the land. Incident response, that's the steps including digital forensics and other things, such as the business response, to respond to such incidents. Incident response and incident handling, that's sometimes that term is typically used synonymously. But basically, incident response, that's the whole technical piece of it. Incident handling is basically just the logistics, the coordination and planning. At the bottom, we can see the incident response process. I mentioned the identification phase, the eradication phase, and the containment phase. Before identification, we have preparation. This is commonly referred to as pie curl. After eradication, we have recovery and lessons learned. Once we're quick to contain, we get the eradication done. I don't know what just happened, and I don't like it. That's weird. I fear that it may be going down for another reboot. We'll try it. So, trying to load it again. I think I'm going to be shopping for a new computer. But anyway, we rush through eradication. We get everything eradicated. We go to recovery, which is when you return something to the pre-incident condition with additional measures. Those additional measures being whatever it is that's going to keep it from happening again. Then we have lessons learned. That one, I would say greater than 50% of the time that step is skipped. That's where you're going to do your hot wash, you're going to do your debrief, you're going to talk about, these are the things that worked really well, and these are the things that didn't work at all. When lessons learned does occur, the problem that comes with that too often is that management, in a management style, I apologize to any managers, tend to take it as a finger-pointing session. I want to know what caused this, I want to know this, I want to know that. Great. It's updating Office now. Gotta love Windows. At least with my work Mac, it warns me for a week before it installs anything. But with the lessons learned, they want to point fingers. This is your fault as a system administrator. You didn't make up an imaginary budget and get it approved through me to buy this product or to pay for this person to do this. I was too focused on compliance to take security in mind. Too often that's the case. It shouldn't be the blame game. Not at all. And we're back again. For now. All right, let me know if you can see this. Good? All right, I'll get up to speed. All right, so this was the slide we were on. So, threat intelligence, sometimes called cyber threat intelligence, or CTI. How does this fit in? Well, you can gather it from your forensics expeditions, your incident response efforts, all the above. Is it the same as digital forensics and incident response? No. Why is it not? Because it is only a small subset. Threat intelligence enables forensics. It enables threat hunting. In the relationship, does CTI trigger digital forensics and incident response? Or is it the other way around? Anyone, is there an answer to this? Correct. And the click. Okay. All right, so types of digital forensics. I've talked a little bit about file system or disk forensics. That's going to use something like SleuthKit, Autopsy, Scalpel, Foremost. To a degree, volatility, FTK. Network forensics, I'm not going to touch that much at all. But you can use tools like Wireshark, TCP dump. Network Miner is a really cool tool if you don't want to go through all the trouble of going through the deep portions of Wireshark. Memory forensics, that's what this is actually focused on. And that's going to be volatility, redline, and recall. If you want to get into the operating systems, everything I mentioned is already included in SIFT, SANS Investigative Forensic Toolkit. It's built on Ubuntu. It has all the tools. It has some scripts custom to SIFT, some that SANS created, some that are just open sourced. They work really well. Remnux is another SANS operating system for reverse engineering malware. You can install that on top of it. If you're doing malware analysis and not working with memory forensics, you're missing a huge chunk of potential knowledge. Kane, that's another one. I've never used it, but it exists. The computer-aided investigative network environment. Kali has some of the stuff. I've never tried it with that, but it could do it. And Mercenary Linux used to be around for threat hunting. I can't validate whether it's still around or not. So with threat hunting, tools and techniques. Any ideas for tools and techniques for threat hunting? Yara, of course. What if I told you that the tools you would use for threat hunting are the same ones you would use for forensics? Would that surprise you? It shouldn't. Threat hunting really is just a sexy industry word that somebody made up to sell a product that indicates doing proactive forensics. In some ways, it's a little bit easier than forensics because you don't have the urgency. In other ways, it's harder because with forensics, you have some idea of what you're looking for. With threat hunting, you may be looking for a specific indicator of compromise. You may just be looking. The benefit to your organization is it's going to slash your incident response time and efforts tremendously. Not all organizations are mature enough to deal with it. Talking about the SANS Top 20 or Critical Internet or Center for Internet Security, Critical Security Controls, if you've not met probably at least 15 of them, you're probably not mature enough for threat hunting. If you don't have an incident response plan, you're probably not mature enough. You're not tall enough to ride the ride. Sorry, go get Mickey's autograph at Disney. So this basically breaks down everything with it. So when we're talking about forensics, it's very reactive. Your incident response effort may be triggered because the FBI comes knocking on your door and says, hey, you've got a system that's beaconing out to this other system. You might want to take a look at it. And oftentimes, the attempts to restore everything is rushed because time is money, and people want to get their systems back up and running. They don't want to lose money waiting for you to find out what the adversary is doing and going through all the steps to actually enumerate them and turn it over to law enforcement. So basically, there's no time objective. Of course, if you're dealing with the consulting aspect of it, just like pen testing, you've got a time requirement. You may only be allotted 12 hours, and that includes your reporting time. It all depends on your organization, how they sell, and what the customer's budget is. But the other thing with threat hunting, and this is one of the reasons why I don't heavily advocate hiring a consultant to do this, because it's based on what is normal. As a consultant, if you hired my theoretic employer, since I don't do consulting in my role right now, if you hired me in my theoretical role as a consultant to come in and do threat hunting, I'm not going to know what's normal. It may be normal, for whatever reason, in your organization for TCP 53 to be open at the firewall. You may have a reason for it. I don't know what it would be. It might just be that you want to get zone transferred, but hey, to each his own. You may log into other systems using PSExec all the time, even HR. I don't know that. I have to find out what is normal so that I can see what the deviations are. So threat hunting certainly should be an internal function, so they have the time to dedicate to understanding the other baseline, not the baseline of what is normal on a single system, but holistically. Here's that standard talk I was talking about, inventory everything, have some sort of network time, NTP, time.nist.gov, whatever. Everything needs the same time. If you're going across multiple time zones, say you have 3 sites in the US and 1 in the UK, you probably want to set UTC as the logging time, because you don't want to have to be sitting there in the middle of an incident trying to figure out what time it is in London when the event occurred at 7 p.m. in Utah. Having that there so that you can have it unified makes life simple for you. We always hear, log everything, be verbose. If you've got the budget for the storage of that and the time to analyze it and parse it, More power to you. Back to the real world, you probably don't have that capability, especially if you're using something that is metered in terms of your storage, such as Splunk. But the logs, they will make you or break you. With that client, had they had network logging or any logging in general, I could have absolutely found some stuff. We've already talked about this. The only thing to add is respect the chain of custody. Don't go changing passwords of compromised accounts. Just leave it as is. Don't take systems offline without authorization, because if this is going to go to court, you're going to need it. Don't delete the VM that was running the RDP. So, to reiterate the memory analysis piece, we have recall, volatility, and redline. There's the tools. I also mentioned GER and Mandiant Intelligent Response. F-Response is another one. So basically, again, we're trying to see what's running on the system. We're trying to find things that are not in the logs. You can actually use it to replace a lot of the sysinternal tools. With volatility, you can output this to a timeline, write it into the same timeline that has everything from the file system, and then compare that with your logs. Because timelines and body files are very important when you're looking at the file system. You can do some level of registry analysis. Malware. Here's all the things you could do. I've already pretty much covered all of it, but you can extract and carve out files in DLL so you can reverse engineer them later and build signatures on them. So basically, every time you update, you need a new sample. Something new is going to be there. Here I talk about prefetch. It basically started in XP. You find that, it's going to talk about what is actually executed, when it executed, and again, the lack of the file is suspicious. Shim cache. There's the registry key if you want to set this to actually write. Basically, it's going to check the compatibility. It's something that it does to ensure that everything operates in a unified manner and things don't go south, similar to how this presentation went south. But you're going to see things in it, such as the file path, the standard information, the process execution flag. These are all things that are going to give you some indication as to what occurred. So with the processes, get your hashes, as I said. You have MD5 deep for the single hash. You have SS deep and fuzzy hashing for the byte by byte. Catalog your registry keys on each update. You could script that with a regex. Write a simple PowerShell script, have it do it, and then ship it off to a storage container. You could do the same thing with memory captures. Storage is going to be the nightmare, though. With your baselines, again, process, server, or service, and driver baselines. So you have that image. So you have your golden image, and then you have your server image, your workstation image, your HR workstation image, your IT workstation image. If any of those systems get popped, you now have an image to compare that to that is known to be good. So when you see that out-of-place driver or that out-of-place process, you can go take a look at it. It might be benign. There may be a legitimate need for it, but it gives you some instance. We'll say the whole needle in a haystack paradigm. Think of it from this perspective. It's going to shine a black light on the haystack, so hopefully you can find the needle. And it might not be the needle you're looking for. You might be looking for a giant needle, like a giant sewing needle, and it might be a hypodermic needle or a piercing needle or, whatever kind of needle. Might even be a turntable needle. But again, do it. You have to worry about storage, though. That's what all of this is going to boil down to. So here was the time for the demo for the RAM capture, but I've been advised I'm under 10 minutes, so we don't have time for that, unfortunately. But to talk about the network forensics piece, take PCAPs as often as possible. Again, storage. You're going to see a theme here with storage. Integrate it with your SIM. If your SIM sees something, it can trigger a PCAP. You can also get information such as NetFlow, basically metadata. Which system was talking to which other system, how long were they talking, and how big was the transfer? You don't need to know what was transferred, you just need to know the size. Vulnerability data. If we didn't mention vulnerability management, we're lost, right? because vulnerabilities enable incidents most of the time. That vulnerability may be you don't update your stuff, or it could be you got phished. It could be that you have a malicious insider, whatever. When you have those PCAPs, carve them. See if you can extract any files from it. Had the demo period actually worked, I had a demo where I was going to pull something out of Network Miner for you. If you want to see it, I'll show it to you after the fact, just in the sake of time. And here was that demo. Filesystem Forensics, same thing, sleuth kit, ICAT, several things. You're looking for blacklisted files or hashes. You can use the National Software Registry library, the NSRL, HashKeeper, or even maintain a custom database. You can find those alternative data streams that's going to give you indication that something's hiding in calc.exe or Notepad. Even if the files have been deleted, you can still carve them out and recover them. Eric can understand this, but Adrian, he's in the Knoxville DEF CON chapter with us. He can see clearly now the rain is gone, now that he's saw the forensics piece. This was actually, there's an owl sitting on his hand, and we just cropped it out. He was doing his impression of an owl at InfoSec World down here a couple weeks ago. So if you want to contact me, here's my contact information. But in the last 5 minutes, I really want to cover this as well. I've partnered with Peerlyst to put a thing together called Through the Hacking Glass. It's a mentorship project that aims to be think of it as the grout between the tiles. We're trying to meet a requirement that academia and certifications don't. So you learn stuff from both, you get a little experience in both, but employers want more. So we're working with vendors to get, not for resale licenses and the such, to be able to actually help people get experience to be able to score the jobs they're looking for. We're looking at doing it both for pen testing, incident response, system hardening, and SOC type stuff on 5 levels of complexity. If you want to know more, there's the information for it. There's my upcoming speaking engagements. Yeah, I'm going to be busy. I hear there's a thing called a personal life and sleep. I've not found either. Any questions? No? All right. If you want a free ticket to HackerHalted, there's a coupon code. Absolutely free. It's in Atlanta. If you want 25% off any of the training, there's that code as well. Yes, sir. Come to the microphone to ask the question, please.
I haven't worked with SSD before. How does the byte-by-byte hashing work, and how does it compare to traditional hashing like MD5 or Tripwire?
It's pure voodoo. So basically, it's just going to, as it's doing the hash, it's going to take a lot longer than like an MD5. It's going to just shoot across. It's going to look at it byte by byte. It's going to create smaller pieces of it that basically you can run a diff of sorts. So you take the good file, the bad file, SSD, and then you're basically going to diff the two.
Okay.
So it's just a more complex diff.
Does it tell you about duplication since it's going byte by byte?
In my experience, I've not seen it, but that's not to say. I've not really dug a whole lot into playing with SSD. I did what I needed to in the courseware. I did a little bit beyond that just as a proof of concept, but I've not dug. Honestly, I've not tried the duplication piece. That would actually be some fun research to determine, like encoding and stuff like that. If you want $100 off a Storm Kit, here's a code for that too. I'm giving social engineering training at these 2 locations. That's why they were highlighted. If you want the t-shirt, I lost my password like I'm wearing right now. There's the link to it. I'm not going to give you the big long URL, but it's $25 on EC Council's website. And with that, thank you very much. I apologize for the computer problem.
Can we please have an extra round of applause for the man who just basically ad-libbed a presentation with no laptop?